Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Amanda Kaufman Show. How you doing, Amanda?
So good.
You ready for another double Kaufman episode?
I think I can handle it.
Okay, let's do it. My name is Rebecca and I am co-hosting today. We were really drawn to talking about something that every entrepreneur goes through at some point, right? You're bootstrapping your business, you're the only person, or maybe you've got an assistant, but you're kind of wearing all the hats at this point. So what we wanted to talk about today was like, how do you balance it all and make sure that the business functions, but also like you're functioning and you don't burn yourself out? Like, what does some tips around that look like? What's a good strategy for someone in that stage of life or stage of business? Yeah. Are you ready to get into it?
Ready. Let's do it.
Okay, amazing. Well, first thing, like, let's just acknowledge, like, what does that like hair on fire? I'm doing all the things, I'm wearing all the hats. Like, what does that typically look like for an entrepreneur who's at that stage?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sign you are an entrepreneur, to be honest. I mean, the decision to become an entrepreneur is so funny because a lot of us get into it because we're seeking more freedom. We have this belief system around like how free we are with the 9 to 5. And so then we think grass is greener. I'm going to go and be an entrepreneur. And the thing is that yes, with great freedom comes great responsibility. And, that freedom, it actually can lead to a bit of an existential crisis. And so what I mean by that is that yes, you have all the choice and all the freedom, but what happens if you end up not focusing on your business and instead taking care of the dishes or taking care of your laundry or taking care of what's happening on TikTok today, whatever the thing is. And you very soon and very quickly realize, oh man, I've actually got to work. And when you dig into the work, you very quickly realize after that, oh my God, like I've got to do the accounting and the administration, and I've got to do all the sales, the marketing. I've got to do all the fulfillment. Oh my gosh, clients want me to reply and respond. And before you know it, you're feeling like your hair's on fire because you've got all of these responsibilities when you used to work in one job. So that was at least my experience. I know that there's a lot of lifer entrepreneurs out there that have always been an entrepreneur, but I think like what happens is we kind of get into this acceptance of it's always going to be crazy. And when we kind of get into that place, the risk of it is if you don't do something about your mindset, about your energy, about your capacity, you start flirting with the potential for burnout. And, so I don't love the term burnout. I think that it is a description of a state of exhaustion that is just beyond. It's like the tired you can't sleep off, kind of tired. And I think like if we're getting into that place where it's this adrenal fatigue and no amount of sleep is going to recover you, we got to have a higher quality conversation about, what are your priorities? What's actually important to you? And in corporate life, we talk a lot about having work-life balance is a thing that gets talked about a lot. And, people really have this belief that there is such a thing as work-life balance. But all that does is basically reduce the conversation into this little opposition. It's like I'm either really doing great at work or I have balance. And I'm like, wait, no. You're whether you're working a 9 to 5 or you're building a business or you're doing none of it, you're building a life. And if you don't enjoy that life because you are, like I said, unrecoverably tired or it feels that way, that's just not that's not your best. That's not the best version of who you could be.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to get into it after this quick message.
Check out my company. I sponsored the show. Okay, bye.
Amazing advertising brought to you by Amanda Kaufman, guys. Let's go. But when it comes to, well, great example of wearing all the hats, hey?
Yeah. I mean, exactly. Yeah. Because the thing is, I don't have the budget for A-lister celebrity to come in and do this thing. And, I guess one person could say that balance is essentially our expression of how do I want to prioritize the resources that I actually have?
100%. And so, someone finds themselves in that position, they feel totally out of whack, off kilter. How does that show up, like, personally, but then also inside of the business?
Well, on a personal note, what most people do is they retreat. They try to come back to center. And I know in my own journey of being in long extended periods of overwhelm and burnout and all of that, I tried to sleep it off, you know? So I would opt out on the weekends, opting instead for sleeping in. And to be honest with you, I thought that was very normal. So I thought that that was like what you do. And if you're listening to this, dear friend, that's not normal. Right? Normal is being able to keep some kind of a rhythm. And now that I know a little differently, my sleep pattern is quite consistent 7 days a week. And so, yeah, we tend to like retreat, we tend to shut down, we tend to all of a sudden implement boundaries that honestly we probably should have had all the way along the way, but for whatever reason we don't. And what happens when we do this really abrupt deployment of boundary is it can actually upset your social circle too. Right? So if all of a sudden you're not available to talk or you're not responsive to texts or you don't go to the regular meetup with your friends or like there's this, like I said, kind of this cocooning thing that kind of happens, this retreat because we want
Like
to
a
be in safe.
protective energy almost.
It is protective, but it's not restorative
Mm.
necessarily. And the reason I make that distinction is loneliness is a really big problem in our modern society. People feel very misunderstood, and it makes a lot of sense because a lot of people were spending time consuming a lot of content. We're in constant comparison with those feeds of am I doing better than or worse than? And of course, the only thing people post on social media is the better than version, right? So we're comparing to things that are fairly artificial. Not saying that those aren't real, but they're highlight reels, right? Like they're not the real. And so the problem with like that isolation is if you don't have a social support system to let steam off with, if you don't have somebody that you can say like this ish is effed and to explain your perspective on that and have somebody else receive that and go, "Oh, yes, yes, that's complicated. You are fine. You are not crazy." That makes the validation. If we don't have that because we're cutting ourselves off, then it's like I said, it's this unrecoverable kind of exhaustion. And then, very unfortunately, sometimes it gets so bad that people end up like self medicating, in other ways. And so just to deal with the discomfort and to deal with the loneliness and to deal with the frustration of feeling stuck and feeling alone on the journey. So, yeah, I think it's a really big issue that doesn't get talked about much because of the nature of how people respond to it, to withdraw.
Fair enough. Well, and I know in like the span of your different businesses and your life of entrepreneurship, I've seen you use a couple different strategies. I've seen you hire teams. I've seen you try to outsource a bunch of stuff. I've seen, a doubling down on your own energy management. Like, of all the things that you've tried, because I think to expect yourself to never feel overwhelmed inside of a business is unrealistic. Like, it's
That's
just
fair.
not going to happen.
Yeah.
So, of all of the strategies that you have tried, what would you say is like your like A tier strategy and are like there ones that are maybe more applicable in more specific situations?
Oh man, you're right. I have done a lot and I've tried a lot of things. And the thing about this conversation is that a lot of times it leads to, well, just do what works for you. And it's just like kind of shitty, terrible, not actionable advice. Honestly, anticipate the emotion. That's like the A plus tier thing is anticipate that there's going to be obstruction to your goal somehow. And it could be nefarious, like it could be that like somebody is out to specifically sabotage you. But more often it's going to be a misstep, a mistake, an oversight, some complexity, something that you didn't really consider because maybe it's like the first time you're doing something, or maybe it's the first time you're doing something in this particular manner. And so I think like the number one thing is don't get all pessimistic and be like, well, if I have low hopes, then I'm going to just automatically be okay because I won't have raised said hopes and then I will be, like that unfortunately is how a lot of people kind of cope and deal is they try to be cynical. They try to get in front of it with cynicism and pessimism. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is anticipate that there are going to be haters. There's going to be people who don't understand what you're doing, and there's going to be people who've never been taught their dang manners. And like that's going to happen. The bigger you get, the more that's going to happen. I think if you could just sort of anticipate that, even if you can't anticipate exactly what's going to happen, that there will be a happening. I know this sounds maybe a little strange, but I think it's pretty great. So I'm going to share it with you. Actually meditate on your anxieties. So the way I think about it is like your brain is already serving up probably. If you're in like a burned out, exhausted kind of a place, your brain is probably giving you catastrophic worst case kind of outlier scenarios. And if you meditate on the scenario, I call it staring down the bear. And it's basically like, okay, so you're worried that this thing is going to happen. Then what? With anxiety, usually we just stop at the I'm worried that this is going to happen. But when you push yourself into this place of like, well, then what happens? How do you respond to that? And then what happens after that? And then what happens after that? And then what happens after that? Earlier days in my business when I didn't have as much conditioning around the emotions and emotional management, my brain went really quick to homeless living under a bridge. Like, just honestly, I would make a mistake. My whole family would be living in a box. We'd be living under a bridge. It would be terrible. And it made it so that I was in such a tension that I wasn't paying attention. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't pay attention in business, it's so easy to fall behind in doing the promotional work. It's so easy to forget to do the follow up. It's so easy to get into a rhythm that isn't serving your clients and not serving you. It's so easy to do because you're not paying attention because you're in tension, right? So the more that you can learn to like do the work of regulation, not from a place of trying to control things that you cannot control. For example, other people's opinions, up to and including your spouse, your kids, your parents, your sister, right? You can't control that. You can't control what they think, and you can't control what they do because of what they think, right? You get to control you. And so getting much more clear than maybe you've ever been about what are the reasons I will endure? What are the reasons what are the reasons that I care so much? I'm going to go to bed at the same time as my 9-year-old, right? Like when I think about the whole balance question, I've definitely screwed it up. And the way that I screw it up is like I'll tell myself the little lie of it's okay to eat the sugary cake at 9 p.m. Or it's fine that the last 3 days have been pizza, reheated pizza, and then cold pizza, right? Like being real is like, yeah, I go through that too. And the thing that really helps me to get back to center is reminding myself the reasons that I'm going to make better decisions today to protect tomorrow. I'm going to make better decisions on average to help keep myself into an even keel place. And I think the more that you can do that, the more you end up being more regulated. And then, of course, we haven't even talked about what can you do on a physiological standpoint. We've been going through a bit of a thing. My husband is a bit of a gym rat, and he's
Okay.
also starting to get a little bit older, and he's also started work that is really convenient to the rest of his day, but it also sometimes means he's getting up at 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning. And the conversation we've had to have lately is that don't just look at physiology and energy management as being like, oh, I checked the box on all the things. I went to the gym and I picked up this many weights this many times, and I ate this many servings of vegetables, and I had this many things of water. Are you resting? And if you're having disruption to sleep, what are you doing to recalibrate? So like in the last year, I've been doing more midday meditations than I ever have. And I've also in some ways had the most business stress I've ever had. And I've had a lot of change and made positive changes, but those positive changes were really significant changes. And so for me, like the number one thing is actually sleep. And I just refuse to stay up late worrying, because if I stay up late worrying, then that worry carries into the rest of the day. It compromises my performance. We don't make progress that day. I think the last thing I'll say about it is the more you can understand basically the statistical distribution of things. So meaning like there's your average, right? And if your goal is to improve your average, you're going to have days that are like major outliers and you're going to do so much better than your average. And you're going to have days that are so much worse than your average, right? And if you just know that, then it helps a lot because you don't get so out of balance thinking that every day has to be this crazy outlier of a day or it's not a good day. Like that's ridiculous. But also if you have a day that is significantly worse than your average day, you know, then expect that. Like that's probably going to happen. Give yourself a freaking break. You know, if like 10 think about this. If 10 of your days are amazing in a year, that's like a
Mhm.
month of amazing. If 10% of your days are shit, like they're terrible, that's like a month. So then we've got this 9 to 10 months of your year that are going to be, some are pretty damn good, some are kind of like, yeah, you know, and that's actually normal. That's not a thing that you need to fight against. If what you're trying to do is raise that average, just realize that it's making decisions that bias you to a higher likelihood of a good day. It's not catastrophic if every day isn't good.
1,000%. So I'm hearing a lot of energy management. I'm hearing a lot of, setting your own expectation that life will life and it will continue to life around your business. When it comes to like the practical management of of wearing all of the hats inside of your business, do you have anything that you could say to help somebody who knows that they have to be the marketer, they have to be the salesperson, they have to be the head of fulfillment? Like, how can you practically approach all of those different roles and still be making a good amount of progress in your business?
I think the first problem that most entrepreneurs have is the word have to. You don't you don't have to market this business. You don't have to sell anything. You don't have to do a darn diddly do thing. And if you're like, "Well, I have to make money." No, you don't have to. And
Actually, I'm
usually
going to pause you right there because we actually have to have this quick message. We'll be right back.
Welcome to one of my first ads for Clairvenu. Yep. It took me about 3.5 years to do my very first ad in my first company. So I figure if I waited 3 months for this company, I'm already doing a lot faster. But yeah, so why do an ad? Well, because we show you how to use systems, and all an ad, my friend, is a system for getting the word out. And if you're really curious about how you could use systems more effectively in your business, then we should get to know each other better. And you should come check out the inner circle, where we marry the coaching and the wisdom and the motivational stuff with like actual brass tacks of systems to help you acquire clients and help you to not go crazy when you are a team of one or a few. All right, my friend, we'll get back to the episode. We'll see you soon.
So you don't have to, hey?
you really don't. I mean, I think the curse of have to in a business is the worst. I mean, it is the thing, the single biggest thing that I see people struggle with. And, you know, thinking back to my clients who have worked with me and willing to pay the most, like they really are committed to better performance. The first curse we have to break is this idea of have to, right? Like I have to market my business this particular way, or I have to hit this particular revenue target. I'm like, you don't have to. You get to. You get the freedom of marketing however the heck you want. One of the cool things about marketing that maybe not everybody knows this is that you got to do it, but there's a tremendous range of what works. And this actually took me a few years to figure out is there's no one right best way exactly. There's just the way that you get damn good at and then apply. So I actually had a text from a friend the other day. He's like, well, I've got a SaaS now, and that's not like standard marketing, which I think was his way of saying, Amanda, I don't want you to market my business for me, which is fair, fine. But the truth is that actually marketing is pretty fundamentally get attention, drive a conversation, make an invitation. That's it. That's all it is. So you can do that with speaking, you could do that with podcasts, you could do that with ads, you could do direct response, you could do PR, you could do like all these different strategies. And at the end of the day, did we hook attention? Did we have a conversation? Did we make an invitation, right? Like if you've done those three things, then it becomes a question of how would I like to do that well? How would I like to improve this? And I think the thing that makes people the most anxious and confused and frustrated is when they are really wishing that the world is different than it is. And I know that that's been my journey as well, is this journey of acceptance of, the things that are against my preference. I would strongly prefer to just have people magically know about me and then enroll in my program and have a good time. Like that would be
Wouldn't that be
fantastic.
awesome?
That would be amazing. Not real life though, right? Like that's not how the universe works. That's not how, not this dimension anyway. Like the way it works is like I said, you got to catch that attention, drive the conversation, drive the invitation. And I'm like loving that framework. It's a really good one. But at the end of the day, the reason we're not good at marketing is because we never spend enough time on it to get good. And the reason we don't spend time on it to get good is because we believe, well, we have to do it. So then we end up falling back on, these checklists and unimaginative things that don't work because they don't hook the attention. They don't keep the tension of a decent conversation. And so then by the time you make an invitation, people are like, oh my God, here comes the pitch. And I mean, to be honest with you, when it comes to like marketing and sales, that, oh my God, here comes the pitch, you're going to get that with a percentage of people, no matter how damn good you are. Like the literal best marketers, the best sales people in the entire world, the best business people, hated. They are all hated. Right. And they're not hated by everyone, but they are hated by some people. Right. And the bigger you are, the more people will hate you. And I remember wrestling with this as a kid. And this is not to sound egotistical. It just is what it is. I like big words and I cannot lie. I love them. They're fun. But I got teased as a kid, for using big words and I was made fun of for being interested in math and science and school and all of that kind of thing. And I liked it. I got a lot out of it and I caught hate for it because it wasn't according to the preferences that they had, right? They preferred smaller words. They preferred to focus on other things. They preferred, right? And so if you just sort of remember at the end of the day, like your have to energy is so often just going in the direction of making people happy who honestly probably aren't even thinking about you all that much and keeping people from being unhappy who, to be honest, whether it was directed at you or someone else, they were going to be unhappy. Like all that energy could be reclaimed right now today if you just remembered you get to, and if you remembered your reasons that you're going to put up with all that. And one final thing I'll say on all this is, I've been talking about like emotional regulation being the A plus thing, anticipating challenge, all that being A plus. I think like a solid B plus, if not an A minus, is actually boundaries. But I would say that boundaries that are established from the very beginning. So I think boundaries get really hard when it becomes a point of conflict. And that's the reason people don't want to have them is they're scared to like have their phone turned off or they're scared to put their phone in a different room because they don't want to miss the call or they don't want to miss the opportunity. And I get that there is a benefit to having speed to the lead on an opportunity, 4,000,000% sure. That's absolutely accurate. And if you're establishing the boundary for the very first time, in a moment of crisis, you're going to surprise everybody. And when everybody's surprised, that's when they introduce even more energy and drama and bullshit. And so I would say, know your boundaries right up front. Do your best to live from those boundaries from the very beginning. And again, like, know your reasons. What's the reason it's so important for you to have your energy optimal? What's the reason you're not going to let in the things you don't want to let in, as opposed to trying to do that in a moment of exhaustion?
Mm. I have one more gold nugget question for you after this message.
Hey, Amanda here, and I am looking for guests for this show. So I'm looking specifically for established entrepreneurs who've figured out a thing or two about how to make this business thing work in the context of a real life. So if you would love to sit down for an episode of the Amanda Kaufman Show and let me pick your brain in front of the people, then make sure you apply at clairvenu.com/the-podcast. Link is in the show notes. Let's get back to the show.
So forgive me, I am going to lead the witness here a little bit, but something that we mentioned at the top of the show is one of the strategies that someone who feels overwhelmed or out of balance can be outsourcing. It can be hiring, it could be getting an agency to do something for you when you could do it yourself. And I know that you've experimented with all kinds of outsourcing and like getting other people to help you accomplish things inside of your business. When is it the right time to outsource? And what's a sign that maybe you should not be outsourcing quite yet?
I was going to say day zero. I think getting into the habit of building a business that is high connection with people around you, like right from the word go, I cannot recommend it enough. Honestly, I think that it's a really good thing to do. Now, it is so important as you do that to recognize your true capacity. So every business has a startup season where you're getting all the systems up and running, you're getting the visibility out there, you're getting, up and rolling. And while you're doing that, it's all invest, 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 right? Every single business, there is not a single business on this planet Earth that can start without some kind of a startup investment. So as you're doing that, like, go ahead and hire the accountant. Go ahead and invest in being in a community of people who are doing the thing that you are doing as well, so that you stop this isolation and this idea that you have to do everything all alone. One of the best exercises for me to identify, like, how could I enroll more support? This is the language I use. It's like, how can I enroll more support? So sometimes it's straight up paying you, right? Sometimes it's just asking, like, hey, would you be willing to? Especially if it's like a one-time ask or a rare ask, just ask. You'd be so surprised how often people will drop what they're doing practically and pick up the phone, or they'll make a connection, or they'll do something for you, not because you paid them, but because they just like you and they want to see you succeed. So I think the other half of that is be that person. Be that person that people can hit up. And, I think especially if you're like a coach or an expert, you got to be really careful about people constantly picking your brain and not having some sort of a place you could direct them to. Choose your friends wisely, but be of service always to as many people as you possibly can. And what you'll find is that other people are willing to be of service towards you as well. And then in terms of hiring, start with the spreadsheet, right? So when you're planning out your business, plan out, okay, here's the first role that I'm going to hire. My favorite book on this, by the way, is Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. Here's the role that I'm going to hire first, second, third, and fourth. Here's the threshold of revenue we need to be at in order to make that hire, and treat it like a goal in your business to have other people working in your business. I was so afraid in my first business to hire anybody. Rebecca, I think you were one of my first North American hires. I had a couple of VAs overseas, but you were my first like similar time zone hire. And it was terrifying. And especially because you were my sister, but I'm so grateful. I am so grateful. And, I think when we have some time, you can share with us too, like, what was that like to step into a supporting role in a business? Like,
Oh, no, 100%. We should definitely have a conversation about that.
maybe a whole
But
other
I think
episode.
Yeah, seriously. Well, and I love your advice about like having the threshold of revenue to support someone coming in. Cause to me, that also kind of implies that like you, once you're at that revenue threshold, will likely have a better idea of what good looks like inside of that role too. Right. So
That's
your
it.
experience is going to be so much greater when you hit, whether it's like 2x what you're currently doing, 5x what you're currently doing. And so your ability to lead that team member or even like an agency or whatever service provider you end up enrolling is going to be so much greater because you have a better sense of what good looks like. I think the 2 cents that I really want to add in is just do not hire someone to do something that you just are too scared to do yourself. Because if you don't have any idea what good looks like, whether that's from an execution standpoint or a result standpoint, it's just not going to work out as well for you because you're not going to be able to direct them in the same way.
Yeah, exactly. And like that can be it's so interesting because like what first came up for me is like, oh yeah, like that's a good way to get taken advantage of is to end up paying a whole lot for what, right? At the end of the day, stress, a lot of stress. But it's also like no service to that person. You know, it can be very, very innocent, but like when I get hired for a job, and I know you're the same way, it's like I want to do a good job of my job, whatever job it happens to be. So if there's no criteria of what good looks like, or if the goal is always shifting, that's always going to cause a lot more anxiety on the team than is necessary.
1,000%. Well, everybody, I hope that you found this episode super helpful. If you are in that space of your hair just being on fire, let's set expectations. Let's work on the energy management. Let's set those goalposts for when we get to hire in that help. If you have any questions, if you're in that spot right now and you're looking for help, let us know down in the comments. Give us a review. Let us know what you're thinking. And we will see you guys next time.